really about me. And all 30 times, because they asked the question, I went, yes. So, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, was told in high school when she went to take her SATs that she shouldn't bother, that she will never have what it takes to graduate from college. It was her high school guidance counselor who gave her that encouraging advice. Instead of shrinking, it created an iron determination. She went on to receive a 4.0 and went on to receive a master's in business, became a celebrated executive in the organization that she worked in. And every time she still goes in front of that counselor's house 25 years later, she remembers being told, you will never amount to anything. Gang, having a strong ego is not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, Lance? Because strong egos are necessary to survive the rigors of life. Would you agree with that? Strong egos will allow you to be resilient when you want to quit. Strong egos will allow you to get off the mat after failure, discouragement, resistance, and detractors. Every time you want to do something great, there is always a reaction. Would you agree with that? And we've talked about for every action, there is what? Not just a reaction, but an opposite and equal reaction. And so if you have high goals and high aims to make a massive difference in life, you better have an ego that's strong enough to withstand the pressure against that. So a strong ego is not a bad thing. However, we also know there's a flip side of the coin. That what can be at the same time our greatest strength can also be what? Our greatest weakness. By the way, I want to welcome all of you here. And there are a bunch of people from all over the country that have just joined us through FaceTime. So would you all wave at the people that are from all over the country? Okay. We welcome all of you from Arizona to Texas to California to New York, all over the place. I'm glad you could join us. Now, what I want to do today is I want to talk about the fact that if channeled by group accountability and high self-awareness, a strong ego can become a great asset. So let me ask you some questions, some key questions. How many of you, by the way, have ever worked with someone, certainly it's not you, who had an inappropriate ego? How many of us? What was it like? What's it like working with someone whose ego has not been mastered and is out of control? What's it like? Talk to me.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting. We'll keep it between us. It's not about sinning. Okay? Why is it so exhausting?
Because you're trying to manage around that ego.
Okay? Always walking around on eggshells. Who else?
You have to constantly build that person up. A lot of energy is spent on reassurance and compliments.
So they can be high needy. Okay? Who else? Yes, back in the back.
One way, there's no collaboration.
Okay? Ooh, my way or the highway. Okay? Doug.
Yeah, I was going to say it's actually an impediment for you to be able to do your job well.
Yeah. It can undermine an entire team. Yes, sir.
I have a hard time trusting him. There's no vulnerability or honesty.
Ooh, that is a great comment. Did you hear that? The stronger the ego, the more we naturally resist vulnerability. However, if you can link strong egos with the strength of vulnerability, that is a masterful combination. But to do that requires very, very high self-awareness on the part of the person with a strong ego. Does that make sense? So let's talk about some key questions to ask yourself. Should I invest in someone who has shown me that they've got a really strong ego? So let me give you some key questions. Number one, are they coachable or do they know it all? Are they coachable or do they know it all? Number two, do they accept accountability? Are they people who receive accountability as a gift or are they threatened by that? The third is, are they hungry to learn? Can they bridle their ego to put the team first? That's a biggie. Can they bridle the ego to put the team first? Do they turn teaching moments into moments of feeling angry and disrespected? Or does it lead to appropriate determination? You guys with me on that one? And can they respect the chain of command while maintaining their own independence and self-will? Those are key questions to ask whether I should continue to really invest in someone whose ego is a real challenge. Now, let me give you some signs of a destructive ego. Would that be helpful? Here are some, I'm going to give you 10 signs of a destructive ego. By the way, for those of you who are watching this, either live or online, after this morning, if you've signed up for this, we will send you a link to this within a half a day so that you will have access to this. Here's what we would ask you to do. We want to continue to widen our impact. If you would be so kind when you get that, would you please share it so that we can continue to widen and to help people accelerate positive change in their lives. Now, 10 signs of a destructive ego. Ready? Number one, the inability or the refusal to listen. While you're talking to them, what are they already doing in their mind?
Thinking of a response.
They're thinking of a response that in their mind they already know is what?
No.
Far better than yours. Okay? People with unmastered egos find that listening is a real challenge. And for that reason, they have difficulty creating trust with other people, just like what you talked about. Because one of the most powerful things that you can do as a leader to generate trust is in communication, what do? In communication, it's not about the talking,
Listen deeply.
it's about the listening. It's about looking them in the eyes and listening deeply. Because you are communicating by doing that. What are you communicating to the other person? I care. That I care about you, I care about your ideas, and I value what you bring to the table. It's a powerful thing, but when many strong, unmastered egos are really narcissists in disguise. And when I'm a narcissist, it's all about whom? It's all about me. Not only is it all about me, but a healthy leader has a strong ego, but can give to other people. A narcissist ego, it's all about me, but what? I suck the life out of other people. I don't build people up, I break people down. And so, second is a preoccupation with self-promotion. over listening to other people's ideas. This is the person that always has the better story. This is the person that you're at the party and they will always have something to top it. You ever been around folks like that? I'm not talking about you, Brad. Okay? Number 3, a constant concern for receiving credit for their accomplishments. A constant concern for receiving credit for their accomplishments. Number 4, jealousy and intimidation by other talented, smart people on their team. Often, leaders who have egos that are not mastered will not bring around them, let's say they're an 8, they will not bring around them 9s and 10s. Who will they often hire? They will hire the 6s, the 5s, and the 4s so that they can dominate them and use them for their own ego needs for power and control. Great leaders who have mastered their egos. We're not asking you to dampen your ego. Did you hear that? We're not asking you to dampen your ego. We are asking you to master your ego. And I will tell you who is often the last person when we have a strong ego. Who's often the last person to see it when we're at a destructive place with it? Who's often the last person? Ourselves. Because we're too close to it. That is why, if you're serious about changing an ego or improving the effects of your ego, you cannot do it without group accountability. You cannot do it without group accountability. That's why here we don't do a whole lot of one-on-one coaching. Because we have found that if you're doing one-on-one leadership development in a vacuum, you're taking that back to your new team, but they have not developed a skill set in order to help you stay in your lane. That is why group accountability and team accountability is essential to helping players with strong egos to stay in their sweet spot. To stay in their sweet spot. Now, also number 5, they will put their direct reports under the bus with their superiors to protect their corporate client. You understand what I'm saying? If one of their superior, one of their direct reports has made a mistake, or their superior is questioning them, they will put them under the bus because they are not afraid to sacrifice someone else if it means that that may limit their corporate client. That's political, that's not leadership. That's toxic, it is not healthy. Number 6, ultra-controlling perfectionism that does not trust anyone else to delegate. Number 7, an intolerance of anyone and of any other methods or ideas but theirs. It goes back to what we said, Kelly, at the beginning. It's my way or the highway. I will tell you that worked to a point in an environment when we had a culture that leadership was about authority and knowledge and competence. Today, the foundation of leadership is about influence and who you are and trust. And if I say I trust you, but then I say it's my way or the highway, and I really don't care about your ideas, Cindy, what am I saying to you? What am I really telling you?
You don't trust
I don't trust you. And not only do I not trust you, I think I'm better than you. You ever been around someone who clearly thinks that they're better than you? Does it create warm, fuzzy feelings? Oh, I am so moved by this person's incredible leadership. I want to be just like this person. Is that what your reaction is? What's your reaction? Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get out of this room. Number 8, they cannot admit a mistake and self-correct. They cannot admit a mistake and self-correct. Number 9, they're condescending, they're arrogant. And often their social skills are absolutely pathetic. Number 10, they need no further help in leadership development because they've arrived. In fact, you need to sit down so that they can teach the process. You guys with me?
Yeah.
Now, in some, they wear people out, they wear people down, they break teams down, and they isolate themselves. Now, as I'm talking, what are you doing in your mind? What are you doing?
Thinking of people I know.
Thinking about people I know. Okay, who else?
Do I do this?
Yeah. Oh, by the way, do you know why I know so much about this? We call him Little Freddy. We all have that little side. And so, where does an unhealthy ego come from? Dan Mulhern does some really good work on this. And here's what he writes. The unhealthy ego is only a show. Where people come on so strong, they are trying to prove to an unconvinced part of their selves that they really matter. The bigger the ego, the deeper the self-doubt. The bigger the ego, the bigger the self-doubt. We all have a permanent companion within us that doubts the proposition that we are as fine as we are. How many of us deal with self-doubt? How many of us? Every single one of us. And one of the unhealthy ways of dealing with self-doubt is we overcompensate on the other side. I was speaking to a group of about 600 leaders for a company that you would all know by name. And when I got up, they had this long list of accomplishments and sports teams that we have worked with and famous doctors that we have worked with, da-da-da-da-da. And, it was really meant to celebrate me and give me credibility. And I appreciated that. But one of the first lines that I said to the group is that all of that, you need to know what really has driven that. What really has driven that is an overcompensation for all those moments that I really think I'm a fraud. 70% of us deal with the fraud syndrome. You know what I'm talking about, don't you? How would you describe it? You describe it. What's the fraud syndrome?
Fake it till you make it.
Fake it till you make it, because if I was really me, people wouldn't follow me. They wouldn't buy into me. And so it's important that if you're going to master your ego, you've got to be very much aware that that's always in the back of your mind. And what is the best way of neutralizing that so it doesn't become unhealthy? What's the best way? Because it operates underneath the table. So what do you have to do? You got to get on top of the table. And me talking to those 600 people, I wasn't talking to those 600 people. I was talking to whom? I was talking to me. Because if I went in there with those 600 people really believing my press, do you think that 600 group of people would have picked up on it in a nanosecond? Yeah. And they would have seen it. This is another gig. And so I knew that I had to ground myself very quickly. That I am no better, no worse than anybody else here. And that we all struggle with the same stuff. When I talk about that, does that cause you to move away from me? Does it cause disgust or disrespect? Or does it create something else? What do you think? What are you feeling as we're talking?
Makes you want to lean in.
Trust.
It makes you want to lean in. It makes you want to trust. Why?
Because you shared that you're vulnerable.
And who else deals with the same stuff? Gang. One of our colleagues had a great line. People will not care about your Superman until they meet your Clark Kent. People will not care about your Superman until they meet your Clark Kent. A person with an unmastered ego will not show what? Their Clark Kents. But in today's culture, people want to know, are you real? Are you human? Are you someone that I can relate to? And that requires a high level of self-awareness and the ability to chop yourself down to size on your own without going into shame and self-doubt. You guys with me? Now, let's keep going. So, I'm going to give you some, Mahern also says this. Here's a key point. Here's the power. If we, including me, can accept that that we are all doubtful about ourselves and are all driven at various degrees to prove our own self-worth, then I can cease from being distracted, offended, or intimidated by an egomaniac. Did you hear that? Because in reality, that verbose, strong person who has to dominate the room, guess who you're dealing with? You're dealing with a little, scared kid. And when you can see that and understand that, it's amazing how you can quit being intimidated. But the other thing that I want to say to you is there's a reason why you're allowing yourself to be intimidated by that situation. Because you are also what? A scared little kid. So one of the things that we know in dealing with high egos, you have to constantly reminding yourself of the need for self-acceptance and self-love. But wait a second, no one can disrespect me in this conversation but me. You may be disrespectful, but that's not information about me. That's information about what? About the other person. It's just information. So in order to lead high ego people, you have to change your value, your validity system, your self-identity system, and recognize that you bring as much to the table as anybody else. And you accept that. With me? Now, what I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to share this, and then we're going to get into a dialogue. What I'm going to share with you sounds easy. We really don't do these leadership things where we get people in a room for 3 hours or a weekend and then turn the fire hose on them in terms of knowledge and all of that, and it changes them forever. That's not how change works. Change does not work with a flashlight. Because what does the majority of the information do? It goes right off, and you can't absorb it all. So deep change requires a soaking rain that just keeps on and keeps on and keeps on. And so one of the things that we know about self-mastery of one's ego is that it requires an ongoing discipline. It requires an ongoing commitment, because the moment you quit working on it, you will start defaulting to your old place. This is a place that you never arrive. Now, so I'm not giving you nice, easy tips. This requires high self-awareness. It requires a process of constant self-evaluation and team accountability. And the reason why that's so strong and difficult is because most teams struggle with accountability. They don't know how to receive it. They don't know how to give it. It is so I'm not trying in any way to say, well, when you're dealing with Mr. or Mrs. Impossible, let me give you some real quick tips. Now, this stuff is hard. This stuff is hard. So let me give you 6 keys. When you're working with a high ego, including yours. 1, keep in the front of your mind not to give your power away to that person. You're giving your power away when you are allowing that person's behavior to dictate your mood. You are giving your power away when you are now saying, because that guy or that lady was such a jerk, it ruined my day. No, it ruined your day. Why? Because you let it ruin your day. We are volunteer victims in that situation. Keep in front of mind that I will not give my power away to Mr. or Mrs. Ego. It's not information about you, it's information about them, unless you take on their power, and now it's also about you. Number 2, impeccable communication. When you're dealing with high egos, their voices are so loud within that your communication has got to be stellar. You have to mean what you say and say what you mean. Your directions have to be clear. You don't beat around the bush. Here's the definition of impeccable communication. It is direct but kind. Tracy and I met someone this past week that we were introduced, and he came into our office. He was a CEO that he was quite proud of. Just a thought. And he immediately said with great arrogance, I just want you to know that I'm direct. And little Freddie did not appreciate it. Because little Freddie was able to read into it and say, I'm not the moron that you think I am. He was not saying that to me. But I was picking up on that. Oh, the reason why he came to us is, do you think he had leadership issues? Do you think that he had people who were not following him? But he had great pride in I am direct. No, he was a jerk. You can be direct without being a jerk. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So being impeccable means I'm going to be direct, but I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be respectful. I'm also going to be emotionally under control when I have this conversation. Yes, ma'am.
So when little Freddie started coming out right away, and how did you turn that situation around with being self-aware so quickly?
My self-awareness came when my wife kicked me really hard.
All right.
No, in all seriousness, I am so aware of how close, because of the place of little Freddie is so big in my life because of trauma that I've endured in my life, and the scars that will always be part of who I am. And I've learned that little Freddie's not a bad dude. He's just not effective in an adult world. How many of us have ever been in a situation that it felt like we were dealing with a bunch of kids? How many of you have ever been in a board meeting that it looked like you were dealing with a bunch of kids? Guess what? You are. And you don't need to be Pete on the shoulder, okay? It's okay, Mr. Superintendent from Luxembourg, Casco. And so we all gain. Part of what you do, you got to create a healthy adult environment. And part of what creates a healthy adult environment is you have adult conversations. So when I misbehave, what do I expect my team to do if they really care about me?
Call you out.
But not just call you out feels a little bit negative. Being my friend is holding me accountable. Hey, Fred, time out. I know what little Freddie looks like, what's going on. And when your little guy is in the room, you're giving information. You're giving information that you don't feel valued or you don't feel safe. And so an effective teammate will stop the conversation right there and say, wait a second, am I saying anything or doing something in which you're feeling devalued? Because if I am, I apologize. That's how you reset a conversation with someone like that, okay? Now, and so impeccable communication is critical to create an environment that limits the extremes of a high ego person. The first one was don't give your power away. Second is impeccable communication. Third, hear this, let the culture neutralize the unhealthy ego. People come to us all the time and say, here's the problem. Our leader will not change. Our leader will never change. And until he or she changes, we have no hope. No. Here's what we tell people. Sometimes we call that person the main stressor. Sometimes the main stressor can't change, and you're stuck with the main stressor. Is that life sometimes? The key is when we deal with a situation like that, is you want to build up the rest of the team to change their consistent behavior to no longer walk around the eggshells around that person. And now you want to create a situation that everywhere that person turns, he or she is going to be met with accountability that's appropriate. With me? You don't try to change that person. You work to create a healthy team. And the healthy team is what helps that person stay in his or her sweet spot or not go to pieces because of their behavior. Fourth, address issues in real time. They got to know that if they go off on someone, there's going to be immediate conversation. You've got to address the issues in real time. 5, you have to provide gratitude, praise, and recognition. Because they're constantly getting, wait a second, stop it, Fred. Well, for that to not feel a personal attack, I've got to balance that with praise and recognition. And lastly, you have to set boundaries when you see diminishing or disrespectful behavior. You've got to deal with it right then. Excuse me. But when you do that, it's not effective for me. So I'm going to ask you if you could work on your tone because it's feeling pretty diminishing right now. I don't want to be disrespectful of you, but please don't be disrespectful of me. When you're not used to that, the first time you have that conversation, where's your heart? It's up here in your throat. But great teams start having that conversation so often that when you have those conversations, it's no big deal. But it takes a while to go from here to here in a process. So we have a few minutes, about 12 minutes left. Let's talk. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question from one of the Facebook Live participants. How best to handle it? It's actually your supervisor and it's a positional relationship and that big ego is somebody you report to.
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. I've had people say to me, oh, Fred, it's real easy for you. You can come in here and teach us and you can walk away, but I have a job. Well, look at how many of you are smiling. That's what half of you are thinking. Gang, leadership starts with self-leadership. You do not give your power away by allowing someone to treat you as an object or a commodity. And so the key is, it doesn't matter who it is. You have to be true to yourself. No matter who it is, you have to be true to your convictions, assuming that they are healthy. I had a general manager of an NFL team that he wasn't a general manager back then when I started working with him because he had already been fired by another team, and it absolutely had devastated him. So he had lost his mojo. And he was dancing around on eggshells, and he had a boss that was very, very strong. And we were having this conversation. He says, that's really easy for you to say, but I have a job. I need a job. And I looked at him and I said, I want to ask you a question. When did you become a prostitute? Just a subtle comment. When did you become a prostitute? He said, I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, I said, let me tell you, no prostitute loves their job. No prostitute puts themselves in that position because it's fulfilling. They allow themselves to be violated every day to the core of their being for one reason. What is it? They need the money. I said, how are you being any different? If you are allowing your core principles and your core being to be violated in order to maintain a job, gang, you may be in the wrong place, or you need to do some growth. And you need to find some courage. Because if you can't lead up, you certainly are not leading from within. There's not and gang, if you setting boundaries with someone who's a bully is going to create a problem, that's information. Guys with me? There's not an easy answer to that. Who else? Talk. Let's talk. What are you thinking? Look at the level of quietness in the room. Why is everybody so quiet?
Because it's a very difficult question.
Yeah.
It's difficult to deal with. Like you just said, if you're dealing with a supervisor who's really off the wrong, you may be risking your job.
Yeah.
And you have to decide whether or not you want to do that.
And I'm not suggesting you be reckless. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to go in there and I'm going to put him or her in his place, because if you are, you're in the same, you've just matched them eye for eye. You've got to be strong, but you also have to have a filter. You also, and a lot of the stuff that supervisor is driving us crazy on is stuff that we are doing in which we're giving our power away. It's stuff that we're doing to give our power away. And I've already talked about two important things. To remember, when you're dealing with that difficult person, you're dealing with a child who's feeling very insecure, just like we are. It allows you to have a level of tolerance. And then it's about you saying, I still need to be true to myself. So how can I respond back to this person with strength, but also be respectful, but also be clear? Guys, this isn't easy stuff. This is deep, deep work. Bobby, what are you thinking? I see your mind going like this.
Absorbing it all. And I think of a situation that we've just released ourselves of. I think we've had an individual like this in our group, and the weight that took off an organization was big. I mean, when we removed that person from the team because they couldn't be part of the team anymore.
Yeah. Who else? Anybody else?
I have Steve here. Steve Hayes is saying honest self-awareness and self-evaluation in these situations is difficult.
Oh, Steve from Colorado, it's great to hear from. Would you agree with that? Gang, I'm not suggesting this is easy. I'm not suggesting that it's a quick fix. I'm telling you, this is hard stuff. But we've been talking about the mastery of the other person's ego. Who do we really have to master in this conversation? Ourselves. That's the real issue. You can deal with difficult individuals with respect and dignity and firmness at the same time. But it's hard. But leaders learn to be comfortable with what? Being uncomfortable. That's not just a nice little trite saying that we have. It is real. You found the same thing. Crystal, what are you thinking?
I'm just thinking that when you are constantly surrounded by big egos, whether it's individuals you work with or even out in the customer base. This becomes a much bigger issue when you think about how it's constantly coming at you. And for me, I just think about times I've been guilty of this, or people in my own life, and it really does lead to recklessness, because you're constantly having to surround yourself with situations or people who are reassuring, and that's not always good for you, you know?
Yes, Tony, and then Caleb.
What is the argument to someone with a big ego as to why it's better to check it and go through the process and get to the point where they are self-aware?
That's a great
there
question.
are individuals who rise to power all the time who have egos, and just.
Gang, did you hear the key word that Tony used is argue with? You don't argue with a narcissist. They are incapable of seeing any other point of view but themselves.
Reason with?
Same thing.
Never change.
At that point, you have to ask. Same thing. But at that point, the person that you most need to be leading is not trying to lead that other person. It's leading whom? That's the key here. It's not easy. Caleb.
Well, it feels like a lot of organizations, people don't just have a big ego to have a big ego and be a narcissist and be difficult to work with. They earn big egos because they've achieved results. Yeah. They're usually high performance, right, within an organization. So top leaders usually have to balance, okay, I understand this person has an ego, he's doing some damage to my culture, some damage to my organization, but dang, he gets results and he's getting what I need, right?
That's right.
I can't risk losing him or her.
That's right. Let me give you an example. I had a professor in grad school who once said that brilliant, gifted people typically have equally brilliant weaknesses. You get someone like a Bobby Knight. He was a brilliant statistician in basketball, but he's most known for what?
Throwing chairs.
For throwing chairs. Okay? Gang, understand that brilliant ego, those kinds of egos are often necessary to do the necessary grind to become great at your craft. But you've got to surround yourself with people who are willing to tell you the truth. That is critical. Yes, sir.
I guess where I'm going is there's a huge difference between when you're leading the other people, the egos, or when the big ego is leading you.
Yes.
And a huge difference in how you can deal with those two things.
Yeah.
It's really almost two totally different situations.
It really is. And it requires, no matter what, in both situations, you've got to be talking to yourself like crazy. You've got to be talking to yourself, how do I be strong? How do I be respectful? How do I be kind? How do I set boundaries? This is an ongoing discussion. I mean, gang, this is the largest by far crowd that we've got over 50, 60 people watching online right now. Why do you think there's so many people watching this thing? Because we all struggle with this. I'm going to wrap. Yes, sir.
I was just thinking of your example about how if you have a big ego at the top, you need to kind of rally the team about how to, work on ourselves and be able to. Is that a method for kind of chipping away? Like if that person who has the big ego sees everybody on the team and they're resilient and they have self-confidence and they can manage it without being torn down, or is it just a coping mechanism to deal with this person?
You just answered the question. What do you think?
Well, I was hoping when I first heard it that it was, okay, well, you individually will be written off by this person, but if everyone they're exposed to in a work environment has the same mentality, that then they'll eventually see it.
Let me tell you a story, and I'll wrap it up. One of my clients earned the Lifetime Achievement Award from Yale Medical School. The world's leading researcher in pancreatic cancer. he had been, despite that, he had been asked to leave 3 different high-ranking research institutes. And if I name the institutions, every one of you would know the institutions. The guy was unbelievable. When they asked us to go and start working with him, the institute that he was working in at that point was in complete disarray because of his eccentricities. He was brilliant. He was coming up with clinical trials right and left, but he was decimating the morale of the staff. And so we started working with him, and I said, let me tell you what's coming. Let me tell you what's going to be coming. When I can't get you to change, but there are enough people around you who want to change. And they're going to learn new methods and find new courage to speak their truth like never before. And we started working with the 20 people around that person. And we started helping them to find their courage and to find their strength as a team. And what he started realizing is every time he misbehaved or acted like a jerk or blew someone away, the team eventually, because they formed a bond, started saying, stop, Dr. So-and-so, that's not appropriate. We care about you and we care about the patient, now stop. And it happened over 1.5 years, and it was painful. But I will tell you, he was able to make a turn. He was able to make a turn, but it was only possible because of the strength of the team. And he was able to transform the way that, because before he had world-class interns around him that he would not share information with, he would not give them difficult cases, it was all about him. And because of that constant form of leadership, of strong leaders around who dared to speak their truth with kindness, with impeccable strength, and they were true to themselves, it had an impact. If you can deal with someone like that, you can deal with Mr. or Mrs. Difficult on your team. But it starts with you having the courage to lead yourself first. Has this been helpful? I want to remind you, please, you're going to receive an email if you've registered for this with a copy of this. Share it. Let other people be encouraged. We are so glad that you're here. We've got folks from lots of different organizations today, excellent leaders who are here, and we're so glad that you're here. Thank you for coming. Let's give ourselves a hand.